Basis for classification. Classification is based on descent from a common ancestor. Historically, scientists have used homologous structures or traits to determine the relatedness of two organisms. Homologous structures are any structure that shows or gives evidence that there's a common ancestor or common ancestry. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of homologous structures, and then I'm going to show you some structures that you might think are homologous at first, and maybe scientists did too, and then we figured out they actually are not. So let's look at the examples. Here's a human and a cheetah and a whale and a bat. These things are all mammals, which means we all have either hair or fur, and we all feed our babies with milk. Um, we're all warm-blooded, stuff like that. Take a look at the front limb. Here's the wing of a bat, the flipper of a whale, the front, I don't know, paw, I guess, what would you call it? The front limb of a cheetah and the arm of a person. Here's the bone, the humerus, and actually every one of them has a humerus. Here's the radius and the ulna, and here they are here for the whale and the cheetah and the human. These are the wrist bones are the carpals in light blue. Here they are. They're actually in every single one. And look at the fingers, the metacarpals and then the phalanges, the fingers. You have them here and here and here. It's sort of amazing. These are all homologous structures, which means that they all descended from some ancestor, some organism that had a humerus, a radius, an ulna, some carpals, and some fingers, or wrist and fingers, which is totally amazing. So even though we don't look very much alike now, these structures, the front limb, gives us evidence that suggests that there was a common ancestor sometime a long, long time ago. So the bones in the forelimbs, that means the front limbs of mammals, are homologous. They show common ancestry. The bones have different functions right now, but a similar structure. So it's a good example of homologous structures. Here's a different piece of evidence for evolution. Similarities in vertebrate embryos can also show relatedness. So here's a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. And if you just look at these, I don't know, how do you know who's who? You kind of have to look at, I guess at this point you can tell who's who. Here's a baby and here's a fish. If you just looked at these, could you tell me who was going to become a baby human and who was going to become a fish? I couldn't. Um, it turns out that mutations that happen in early embryonic development tend to kill the embryo. So you tend to get maybe some regulatory mutations, but in general, these things look a whole lot alike, which suggests, again, that they evolved from a common ancestor. Okay, so back to homologous structures. Here's what, this is a confusing one. And so which two are most closely related? A butterfly, a bird, or I don't remember his name, the K-pop guy. Uh, and this is where scientists could get confused. So some structures that look alike are not homologous, they are analogous. So that means they're not derived from a common ancestor, although they end up looking alike. So let's take a look at this. Here's a bird wing and here's an insect wing. They're both used for flying, so they kind of have the same shape. They're kind of long and delicate and thin. But this one, the bird wing, has bones and feathers, and the insect wing doesn't. It's got some exoskeleton. So they look alike because they're used for the same thing, but they actually don't show common ancestry. So birds and insects might both fly, but this similarity is not used to classify them into a group because it's not inherited from a common ancestor. So who's the most closely related? The K-pop guy and a bird. Both of these things are chordates, so they have bones in them. They have a brain and spinal cord. Um, this one has a brain, but it's not a chordate. It doesn't have the same. Wait a minute. Yeah, no, it has an exoskeleton. Doesn't have a vertebrae or anything. It's a bug. It's a really, really pretty bug, but it's a bug. Whereas these two, birds and mammals, we're both warm-blooded. We both have bones inside of us, the vertebrae and the notochord. Okay, here's another one. Who is most closely related here? A bat, a person, or or a bird? And so again, let's look at the arms here. Here's a human, here's a bat, and here's a bird. And so these all kind of look alike. They do. They look a lot alike. However, most birds fly. Every bird except what, a penguin maybe? And bats, I think all bats fly. But this similarity is not used to classify them because it's not inherited from a common ancestor. A bat and a human actually are both mammals because they both have hair or fur and they both feed their young milk. So the bat and the guy are more closely related. Let me go backwards a second. Here's a bird, and it is an endotherm. It's warm-blooded, but it has feathers, not hair, and it doesn't feed its young milk like these two do. So these are the bat and the person are both mammals. Okay, which two are most closely related? Now this is a tricky one. Look at how that one flies and looks like that one, right? And how that one swims and looks like that one. Turns out if your ancestors evolved in the same kind of place, doing the same kind of job, over a long, long period of time, you end up looking alike. So the whale ends up looking like a fish, even though the whale's a mammal. And the bird and the bat end up looking alike because they both fly, even though this one's a mammal and that one's a bird. So in spite of all the other differences between them, the fact that bats and whales both feed their young with milk, and they also both have hair, is one of the features used to classify them both as mammals, since it was inherited from a common ancestor. So let's go backwards for a second. These two look so much alike you would think that they would be the ones that are related, but they're not. Warm-blooded, cold-blooded, hair, scales, um, feeds young with milk, does not. This one lays eggs in the water. This one has a placenta and has its babies grow inside of it, gives birth to live young. These two, they look a whole lot alike. They both have wings, they both fly, they're both warm-blooded actually, so they're not that distantly related. This one has feathers and this one has hair, so they're different. This one doesn't feed its young with milk. In fact, it lays eggs. This one gives birth to live young and feeds its babies milk. So it's actually these two that are the closest related. They're both mammals. They both have hair. They both give birth to live young and feed their babies milk. Cool, huh? Today, instead of looking at homologous structures, although we do still do that, but today scientists use molecular similarity. So remember what a molecule is, right? A bunch of atoms put together. And so when we talked about the important molecules, we talked about carbs and lipids and proteins and nucleic acids. The ones really important for genetic information are DNA and RNA. So we look at the sequence of ATCs and Gs in DNA or AUCs and Gs in RNA, and we look at what that produces, the amino acid sequence of proteins, and that helps us determine how closely organisms are related. So let's go backwards again a second. So if you looked at these two, they would have more DNA in common than this one would with that one or that one with that one. Quiz time. Long-tailed weasels and European otters are both classified into the family Mustelidae. Which of the following types of information was most likely used to classify these animals into the same family? This is a tricky one. Too bad they didn't use DNA. Their food source, their skeletal structure, their location of habitat, or their method of movement. I actually hate this question, but let's go through it. Location of habitat, where they live. Well, lots of things live in the same place. Like, I think I have mice in my attic. Oh my God. And I think there's probably some ants crawling through my house. Just because we live in the same place does not mean we're closely related. Method of movement, that's not really a bad one. Food source, you can be pretty unrelated and still share the same food source, so I would go away from that one. So we're sort of between these two, and I'm going to go with skeletal structure because I think scientists would more likely look at like the structure of the bones in an arm kind of thing. And there we are. That question is a little ambiguous, but anyway, what you need to do on an impasse is go through and make your best guess if you don't know the answer. Scientific evidence shows that modern dogs, wolves, and foxes all have a common ancestor. Further evidence shows that dogs are more closely related to wolves than to foxes. So you can underline stuff, dogs, more closely related to wolves than to foxes. Okay, which of the following observations provides the best evidence that dogs are more closely related to wolves than foxes? Let's see, the diets of dogs and wolves are more similar than the diets of dogs and foxes. The lifespan of dogs and wolves are more similar than the lifespan of dogs and foxes. The genetic, ooh, I like this one already. The genetic sequences of dogs and wolves are more similar than the genetic sequences of dogs and foxes. And the body size of dogs and wolves are more similar than the sizes of the body. Okay, really, who's most closely related? You and your brother and sisters, or you and your third cousins? That's really what we're looking at here. So the answer here is C. Quiz time. An extinct shark named, oh my goodness, something or other, existed over 100 million years ago. It had a long snout, sharp teeth, and a long tail fin. Which of the following statements explains how scientists most likely learned this information about Scapanorhynchus, whatever it is? They studied the fossil remains of it, they analyzed the DNA of it, they looked at the skeletons of modern sharks that lived where this guy lives today, or back then. They studied the anatomy of other aquatic animals that lived when this guy lived. Okay, so this is a little tricky because I was saying earlier, ooh, DNA, 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 and that's not the case here. If you're looking at a fossil, if you're looking at something that's extinct, you're probably looking at fossils. So it's going to be A. And I haven't really talked about that much. With this one, we'll go back to that when we do our evolution unit toward the end of the year. The scientific name for a cougar is Puma concolor. Which of the following organisms is most closely related to the cougar? This one should be a slam dunk for you. Don't get this one wrong. None of them say exactly the same thing, Puma concolor here. This is actually, I shouldn't say slam dunk, this is a little bit tricky. Look at this. This one has the same species name, but this one has the same genus name. So go back to that picture we were looking at with King Philip came over for good soup. Sometimes you'll actually have the same species name, but if your genus is different, you're not very closely related. So this one is actually going to be this one. So that's kind of a tricky one. So I lied. It's not really a slam dunk. Be careful with this. This one has the same species name, but that's only because they ran out of species names, I guess, or someone was silly and named it that. Different genus name means they're not really very closely related. So really that's a little tricky. In humans, the appendix is small and is not needed for digestion. In rabbits, the appendix is well developed and is used in the digestion of plant fibers. Which of the following provides the best evidence, the best scientific explanation for the presence of the appendix in both humans and rabbits? Rabbits and humans live in environments with similar conditions. Rabbits and humans are both eukaryotes with similar cell structures. The appendix is evolving into a new type of organ in rabbits and humans. The appendix is inherited from a common ancestor of rabbits and humans. Pause this because I'm going to give you the answer. The appendix is inherited from a common ancestor. That's why we still have it. Adios.